preserve the king, and his throne is upholden by mercy. The glory of young men is their strength, and the beauty of old men is the gray head. The blueness of a wound cleanseth away evil, so do stripes the inward parts of the belly. So in verse 27, the Bible said the spirit of man is the candle of the Lord, searching all the inward parts of the belly. And then if you'll notice in verse 30, the blueness of a wound cleanseth away evil, so do stripes the inward parts of the belly. And as we look at these two verses, of course, last week we didn't have time because the truth of verse 27 is a very profound thing, and that is that our spirit being affected by a situation is not nearly as indicative of a problem with the situation as it is of an internal problem. The Bible said the spirit of man is the candle of the Lord, meaning that our spirit reveals the problem or inward issues. It reveals inward issues. Notice, the spirit of man is the candle of the Lord, searching where? The inward part of the belly. The inward parts of the belly. So it isn't a revealing of something outward. It is revealing of something inward. And oftentimes we can face a situation that is extremely similar one time and face it well, and another time and face it less than well. And that's not because the situation is so different, but rather it is something in our heart that is wrong, that is now revealing that. And God uses the spirit of man to reveal the inward problem. It's a highlighter. Then verse 28, he gives you some good or the right spirit. Notice he said, mercy and truth preserve the king, and his throne is upholden by mercy. And so the emphasis there is on a good spirit. But then you get to verse 30 and you find this: the blueness of a wound cleanseth away evil. So we're dealing with the idea or the connection here that Solomon's making with a bruise, the blueness of a wound here. And then he's going to make a comparison, and he says, so do stripes the inward parts of the belly. So do stripes the inward parts of the belly. Now, some of you are going, yes, as long as I'm wearing a striped shirt, I'm cleansing away. That's not what he's talking about. Okay, he's not dealing with socks. He's dealing with the idea of judgment. He's dealing with the idea of punishment. Now, how do you know that? Not because I said so. Look with me, if you would, back at chapter 19. Look at verse 29. Judgments, Proverbs 19:29, judgments are prepared for scorners, and stripes for the back of fools. Judgments are prepared for scorners, and stripes for the back of fools. So the idea here is that someone has been striped, their back has been beaten and left a mark. And here's what God said. God said that cleansed away the evil of the inward parts of the belly. That the chastisement and the judgment was a necessary thing. And it cleanses away evil. So if our spirit is the revealing of the inward issue or the highlighting of it, then the stripes here of verse 30 are the removal of the inward issue or the healing of it. Notice he said the blueness of a wound cleanseth away evil. Now, I want you to go to Proverbs 17. I want to show you something, because that's when you go, all right, remember, these are Proverbs. You understand? These are general truths. These are general truths. Can you cleanse away the evil of the inward parts of the belly without stripes? The answer to that is yes. What we have in Proverbs 20, verse 30, is actually the response of God. And I'm going to show this to you. It is the response of God when you won't listen to what He's revealing in your spirit. Notice Proverbs 17, look at verse 10. Proverbs 17, verse 10. A reproof entereth more into a wise man than 100 stripes into a fool. So a reproof is actually a greater teacher for a wise man than the stripes are for the fool. But stripes cleanse away the evil of the inward parts. You know the problem with a fool is? He doesn't value the reproof. Let me show you these reproofs and this rod as being necessary. Go with me to Proverbs 29. Proverbs 29. Look at verse 15. Proverbs 29:15. The rod and reproof give wisdom. You understand here that the rod and reproof give wisdom? Remember, a reproof entereth more into a wise man than 100 stripes into the back of a fool. It is both giving a lesson. The question is, let me ask it to you this way. Which way do you like to learn? Now, we all say, reproof, please, except we don't listen to reproof. Then what? Notice the rest of the verse. The rod and reproof, where we at? Verse 15. Give wisdom, but a child left to himself bringeth his mother to shame. So, let me just say it this way. Leaving you alone is not the answer. Well, I don't want a reproof or a rod. That's not the answer. When the wicked are multiplied, transgression increaseth. Verse 16 says, but the righteous shall see their fall. Look at verse 17. Correct thy son, he shall give thee rest. Yea, he shall give delight unto thy soul. You realize that here's what God said. The rod and reproof give wisdom. He said if you leave a child to themselves, they'll actually bring you to shame. But if you'll correct this one, he'll give you rest. And he'll actually give delight to your soul. So while the reproof and the rod are not pleasant to give nor receive, God said that it would produce something that is beneficial not only to him, but also to you. Do you understand? How many of you as a kid, you were punished by your parents and you were told, this is going to hurt me more than it hurts you, and you thought there's no way that's possible? Until you got put into the parents' role, right? And you went, oh, there was something on the other side of that correction. Which is why the command to correct is so prevalent, because our heart is, I want what's best for my child. Our heart is, I want I want them to be happy. I want them to have a good life. And what produces that is the correction, and it is the rod when the reproof is ignored. Now, I'll show that to you in just a minute, but let me say it this way. Stripes are not the desired method of removal. They're not the desired method. You understand, God would much rather you learn from His Word than from His chastening. Let me show this to you. Come to 1 Corinthians, please, chapter 11. 1 Corinthians 11. Verse 31. First Corinthians 11:31. For if we would judge ourselves, we should not be judged. But when we are judged, we are chastened of whom? Of the Lord. That we should not be condemned with the world. How many of you want to be condemned with the world? Any takers? No. So God says, look, listen now. In God's understanding, here's what he says. The condemnation of the world, that's not an option for my children. That's not an option. And in order to keep that from happening, here's what he said. He said, there has to be a judgment. And if you would judge yourselves, you'll not be judged. Right? If you will, in the light of our passage, the spirit of man is the candle of the Lord, searching the inward parts of the belly. How many of you just this week alone have had your spirit tell on you? I mean, it's kind of become a joke amongst a few of us. My spirit was affected by that. Right? Yeah, it was affected. And the problem wasn't that way. The problem is this way. One of the things that we're trying very hard this year not to let happen, that's just, we'll say, confession, is transparency, is that with the meeting coming up, a lot has to take place and a lot has to happen, but we cannot allow it to affect our spirit. We can't allow it to ruin, right? How many of you have ever been wanting to do something for the Lord only to have problem after problem, and then when you go to do that thing for the Lord, you're all grumpy about it? Well, that was a good thing, wasn't it? That was really the way to approach that. No, the devil's trying to use something. I mean, you want to go do something, maybe you're going to go sing, you're going to go preach, you're going to go hear somebody preach, go to a meeting, and wouldn't you know it, you get a flat tire on the way. Wouldn't you know it, something comes up. You're on the way, and something happens. And listen, those things don't have to derail what you're doing. But they are attempts. And when we do respond the wrong way, our spirit is the candle of the Lord. It's the flashlight that God's pointing out, saying, you see your heart? And he knew it, but he's showing it to us. Now, here's the problem with the Spirit revealing that truth. We often are ignorant of it. How many of you have ever had your spirit affected because the other person was an idiot? Come on now. Absolutely, right? Hey, it was their fault. I'm mad. No, it's not. No, they. And the Lord's like, that's searching the inward parts of the belly. That's on the inside. Because I will remind you that which proceeded forth out of the mouth, where does it come from? So when we open our lips and we spew out sin and anger and wrath and malice and stress, frustration, and the like, I say to you, that's coming from the inward part. And that is a reproof. It's the Lord shining the light going, you going to deal with this? But oftentimes, simply out of ignorance, we just didn't even recognize it. Or indifference. Well, if they hadn't have, then I wouldn't be this way. And listen, I got to be honest here. Spouses are a bad place where that takes place. Husband-wife relationship. Well, you know, if he just wouldn't have thrown his socks on the floor, I wouldn't be in a bad mood. Well, if she would have just not burnt the chicken, I wouldn't be in a bad mood. Your bad mood is an indicator that you would have regardless. It was the highlight that God said, no, the problem's not with them. It's with you. And when we try to deflect it to an outward source, we're missing what God is doing. So a lot of times we don't even recognize it. Or we ignore the reproof. I have a right to be mad. Okay. Here's the candle. Now I don't want to listen. And God will say, okay. Oh, good. So I get to just be whatever? No. There's judgment coming. No, because if you won't get the wisdom through the reproof, guess which tool is left? The rod. Judgment's coming. Come back to, Go to Luke 12. Go to Luke 12. I want you to see that these stripes, Luke 12, are connected to a specific circumstance. And as a parent, I would encourage you to consider how God judges, how God chastens His children, and pattern yours after Him. Chasten your pattern. Let me reverse that. Pattern your chastening after the Lord. Notice Luke 12, if you would, please, verse 47. And that servant which knew his Lord's will, we're right in the middle of, or at the end of a parable. This is the judgment on a servant. That servant which knew his Lord's will and prepared not himself, neither did according to his will, shall be beaten with many stripes. But he that knew not and did commit things worthy of stripes shall be beaten with few stripes. For unto whomsoever much is given, of him shall be much required. To whom men have committed much, of him they will ask the more. So you understand that there is an increase of stripes here to those which know to do and don't. Those that knew the will of the master, knew the will of the Father, but didn't do it, receive more stripes than those who maybe even didn't know but did things worse. Because the ignorance, is not the goal. You're missing the reproof. He always instructs before he corrects. And so here's what happens is when that reproof is ignored, there's the rod. A lot of times we're not even aware of the fact that our spirit is being used by God to speak to us. God's getting onto us. How so? You're having a bad day. No, God's not getting onto me. The world's just a mess. No, the world was a mess yesterday too. And guess what? It's going to be a mess tomorrow. You say, it's never been this bad. You realize that there was a day in history that God likens a coming day to. What do you mean? As the days of Noah were, so shall also the coming of the Son of Man be. So you say, man, it's as bad as it's ever been. There was a day. So understand here that God is going to reprove you by your own spirit. He uses it. It reveals the inward issue. But the stripes have a purpose. The stripes have a purpose. The purpose is a healing, a cleansing away of evil. Come back with me, if you would, to Proverbs 23. Let's look at a couple verses here in Proverbs. Maybe one more place of Scripture outside of the Proverbs, and then we'll be done. Proverbs 23. Look at verse 13. Well, I care about somebody, so So here's what I will do. I will withhold correction. That's what I'll do because I want what's best for them. So I'll withhold correction. By the way, that is a line of thinking in parenting today. I love my kids too much to correct them. Here's what the Bible said, withhold not correction. Look what it says, Proverbs 23, look at verse 13. Withhold not correction from the child, for if thou beatest him with the rod, he shall not die. Thou shalt beat him with the rod, notice this, and shalt deliver his soul from hell. Do you understand the severity of that? Go with me to chapter 22, look back just maybe on the other side of the page, look at verse 15. Here's why. Foolishness is bound in the heart of the child. You see that? Foolishness is bound in the heart of a child, but the rod of correction shall drive it far from him. Please listen. Foolishness is bound in all of us. Do you understand we all start out as children? So it's bound in us. Now, a reproof entereth more into a wise man than 100 stripes into the back of a fool. Here's the problem. We don't start out as wise men. We start out as foolish children. And so we don't listen. And so God said, withhold not correction. Why? Because the stripes have a purpose. Well, what's the purpose of the stripes? The cleansing away of the evil on the inward parts of the belly. There's a purpose to the stripes. Go back to chapter 13, Proverbs 13. Look at verse 24. Well, I'm just not gonna punish my kids. He that spareth the rod, Proverbs 13:24, hateth his son. But he that loveth him chasteneth him betimes. So the world says, well, I love my children too much to punish them. God says, no. If you love your children, you will chasten them. You will chasten them. Why? Because there's foolishness bound in the heart of a child. And when they won't receive the reproof, the rod is coming. Now, let me give you a great example of this in society. Are you ready? In society, you are given a reproof every so often on the interstate. It is 2 numbers, 7, 5. It's called a speed limit. It doesn't matter what kind of day you're having, the reproof is the same. 7, 5. Now, you don't have to heed the reproof. But if you don't, there's a rod. Woo, 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 woo. Blue lights. Police officer friend of mine said, push hard, you're signing 5 copies, right? Like, there's a rod. Why? Because mean old police officer doesn't want you having fun on the interstate. Is that why? No. Do you know why? Look, both of these kids over here that are almost driving age looked at each other like, yeah, that's why. Foolishness is bound in the heart of grace. No, listen, here, that's how we all think, right? Man, I want to go as fast as I can. Do you understand there's a reason why teenage mortality in car accidents is higher than other age groups? Why? Because foolishness is bound in the heart of a child. You know what they're trying to avoid? The number one cause of fatalities in accidents is speed. I mean, speed is a contributing factor to mortality in accidents more than anything else. But we go, man, that police officer is just trying to, he made me late. Look, listen, if you live 25 minutes away from church, I don't want to say that, too many of you live 25 minutes away from church. If you live 7 minutes away from church and you leave 3 minutes before church, the police officer didn't make you late. You were already late. Now, when you got a ticket, the police officer made you more late. But you weren't late because of him. You were already late. You ever been doing something wrong and somebody else reacts wrong to your doing wrong? Now you blame your wrong on them? Oh, yeah. Like, you were throwing ball in the house, but your brother hit it with a bat and broke it, broke the wall, smashed the lamp. And you're like, well, he hit it. It's like, dude, you pitched it. What did you think was going to happen? Oh, it's his fault, not mine. When we refuse the reproof, the rod is there to cleanse away evil. Now, look at, if you would, one more place here in Proverbs 19. Proverbs 19, verse 18. We're going to bring this to a close here in just a minute. Proverbs 19, 18. How many of you have ever heard somebody that was rich? Heard about somebody that was rich, got found guilty of something in the court system, and this is the phrase that'll get used. Oh, they just got a slap on the wrist. You ever heard that? You know what that means? Here's what it means. They had a show of chastening without any hurt. It didn't do anything. So you know what happens? Oh, judge, yep, guilty. Didn't affect you. You sped on the way. I've seen more people speed away from a cop getting a ticket. I'm talking about they were pulled over. Now they're more late, so they speed faster. I got to make up the time. No, idiot, learn the lesson. Slow down. Why? Here's what I will submit to you. Because it didn't bruise. Now I'll show you this. Look at Proverbs 19, verse 18. Chasten thy son while there is hope, and let not thy soul spare for his crying. Let not thy soul spare for his crying. Do you understand? When it hurts, when the lesson hurts, there's more value in it. Come back to our verse. Look at verse 30 of Proverbs 20. The blueness of a wound cleanseth away evil, so do stripes the inward parts of the belly. This is likened to a bruise. Now, every one of us in here have had a bruise before. Do you understand that the Lord likens this to a bruise, a blueness of a wound? So I was thinking about this. And the blueness of a wound causes it to be tender. You ever, as a kid, maybe you've never done this. I was a bit of an intriguing individual as a child that produced this. I'm sorry. And so here there was a time when I had a bruise on my arm. I'll not forget it. And so I was pushing the bruise. because it hurt. And it was like, why is it doing that? And the more I pushed it, guess what? The more it hurt. It's tender. It takes time to recover. How many of you have ever bumped into something and went, ow, and then immediately forgot about it? It didn't bruise, right? Just you bumped into it. Oh, man, that smarted, right? And done, gone, over, back to life. Do you remember when it was? Do you remember the time? No. But do you remember that bruise you had that was hitting everything? Do you realize the difference is one of them takes time to recover and you remember it longer? So God's going to liken this chastening of stripes to the blueness of a wound. He's going to liken it to a bruising. He's going to liken it to something that is tender, it hurts, that there's a time to recover, and that reminds you of the event. We'll say it this way, it's lasting, not immediately forgotten. I would submit to you before we get here, but some of us take longer to figure out what God's doing than others. I mean, some of us don't even remember how we got a bruise before. I don't even know what I did, but this hurts. Hey, listen, maybe you should not do what you did. Watch. Yeah, but I don't remember what I did. Here's the amazing part about chastening. Some people don't even know what produced the chastening. They just know it hurt. Because we're stubborn people. But stripes aren't the preferred method of instruction. He doesn't want it to hurt. He wants you to get it through reproof. I was talking to a preacher today who said, we all make our own mistakes, but you don't have to make mine. And that's profound, because you understand you're going to make mistakes in life, but you don't have to make the same mistakes your parents made, the same mistakes everybody else in the room made. Hey, you want to be a wise person? Look around at the mistakes that have been made in this room and don't make theirs. Oh, it doesn't mean you're not going to go through life without making any. No, you will make yours. But you don't have to make the same mistakes. It's like everybody walking in hits their head on the, Brother Ed's walking in, hits his head on the door frame. The rest of us don't have to worry about it. Miss Jen has never hit her head on a door frame in her life. Okay? But listen, if we all walked in and every single person walked in and went, boing, and just kept going. And then the next guy, boom, and kept going. Then the next guy, boom, and kept going. At some point, somebody ought to be like, hey, maybe we should duck. Build bigger doors. But what we do oftentimes is we see that one hit the door, and that one hit it, and that one hit it, and that one hit it, and we're like, I bet you it ain't going to hurt. Every single one of them walked away going, ow. What makes you think it's not going to hurt you too? Right. So go to Hebrews 12. Hebrews 12. Notice the context here. Look at verse 3. For consider him that endured such contradiction of sinners against himself, lest ye be wearied and faint in your minds. Okay, consider Christ, right? Verse 2, looking unto Jesus, consider him, Christ, that endured such contradiction of sinners against himself, lest ye be wearied and faint in your minds. Well, what are we considering about him? Could I submit it? This is what we're considering. Isaiah 53, verse 5. He was wounded for our transgressions. He was bruised for our iniquities. The chastisement of our peace was upon him, and with his stripes we are healed. Peter said, by whose stripes ye were healed, for ye were as sheep going astray, but now are ye returned. You understand, we're supposed to consider him because he took the wrath for us. He took the bruising. He took the stripes in our place, lest ye be wearied and faint in your mind. Why? Verse 4 says, you've not yet resisted unto blood, striving against sin. Verse 5, and ye have forgotten the exhortation which speaketh unto you as unto children. My son, despise not thou the chastening of the Lord, nor faint. Do you see the connection? Nor faint when thou art rebuked of him. For whom the Lord loveth, he chasteneth, and scourgeth every son whom he receiveth. If ye endure chastening, God dealeth with you as with sons. For what son is he whom the Father chasteneth not? But if ye be without chastisement, whereof all are partakers, then are ye bastards and not sons. Furthermore, we've had fathers of our flesh which corrected us, and we gave them reverence. Shall we not much rather be in subjection unto the Father of spirits and live? Isn't it interesting? In the discussion of scourging and chastisement, he is referred to as the Father of little s spirits. Why? Because the spirit of man is the candle of the Lord, searching the inward parts of the belly. Verse 10, for they verily for a few days, that's our earthly fathers, for a few days chastened us after their own pleasure. But he, for our profit, that we might be partakers of his holiness. Now, no chastening for the present seemeth to be joyous, but grievous. Nevertheless, afterward it yieldeth the peaceable fruit of righteousness unto them which are exercised thereby. Here's the thought. It will be done. God wants to highlight the heart through the reproof and the revealing of our spirit. But when we don't hear or heed the warning, he scourges. There's stripes, chastening. And those lessons, listen to me, those lessons hurt. By design. And we weep. We look at hard days as bad things. God says, when the lesson isn't being gotten, a hard thing is the best thing for you. Because, we've said this many times, hard lessons are not easily forgotten. As the blueness of a wound. It has a tendency to stick around a while. You ever get a bruise in the spring and it go away and fall? Right? I mean, it lasts forever. You're like, man, when is that thing going to go away? It's is still there. You know what it's doing? It's reminding you. You ever have something that took a long time to get past, to get over? Now listen, when it's correction, here's what we want. Here's what we want. I did this great sin because I wouldn't listen. But you called me out on it, Samuel. So I have sinned. Yet honor me now in the sight of the people, Saul. Look, I know I messed up, but can't we just get this over with and so we can get back to this honor me part? Like this great sin of disobedience against God, this great sin. Yeah, I get that I've sinned, but can't we get past that quickly? No. In fact, cut off. I'm done with you. David, Bathsheba, thou art the man. Watch this now. I have sinned. They say the exact same thing. The exact same thing. Go look it up. Saul and David said the exact same thing to being called out by the preacher. Here's the difference. David gets on his face, fasting and weeping for 7 days, receiving the correction from God. And he doesn't get mad at God because he's receiving chastening. He says, I brought this upon myself. He also never forgot it. Saul tried to act like it never happened. David never wanted to forget the lesson. How do you approach your sin? I don't want nobody to know I'm a sinner. Or, well, I don't ever want to do that again. Which approach do you have? Because I promise you this, if you won't get it, that your spirit is throw a javelin at the man that God has picked, I'm going to try to kill him. I can't kill him. You don't get that your spirit is Saul. I'm going to just kill everyone and anything that gets in my way. And when I was little in my own sight, God made me big. But now that I've been exalted, now I'm a big deal. You're still nothing and nobody. You won't get it because your spirit is this way. You don't get the easy lesson. God loves you too much not to give you a hard lesson. He loves us too much to let us stay proud. Because you see, God resisteth the proud. So we bow up at the reproof. Well, who does he think he is? Missed it. Something that was pointed out, never even thought about it. Something that was pointed out to me about David is he names a son after that prophet who put his finger in his face and said, thou art the man. He names a child Nathan. Boy, thank you. I needed that. No, we don't like our lessons. Do you understand there's not an adult in here that doesn't have hard lessons in their past? Some things that if they start thinking about them right now, will bring a tear to their eye. Why? Because it was a blueness of a wound. Some of those wounds will never go away. Some of those, you can still go back and it'll affect you. Going, oh God, that's who I am. But for your grace. Worst thing could ever happen to a man is to be left to himself. God loves you too much. So he's going to put you through chastening. stripes. Hard days. Now watch. He's not doing that to destroy you. He's chastening, scourging, and I know it seems grievous, but it is to produce a peaceable fruit of holiness. It is for your profit. That's what he said, Hebrews. Here's the dilemma. One more verse and we're done. Proverbs 29, verse 1. He that being often reproved hardeneth his neck shall suddenly be destroyed, and that without remedy. I ain't listening. I ain't listening. I ain't listening. We go through it. And now, oh, that mean old God. I just can't believe he'd ever let something like that happen to me. Missed it. Missed it. It may have been intended to humble you, and it hurt, but it was from the one that has the remedy, healing. But when the chastisement comes and you refuse the reproof, if you just continue to harden your neck, here's what he said: sudden destruction, and that without remedy. You know what that means? You don't have the Father on the other side of it going, come here. Let me heal you now. Let me help you. Yeah, your life's a mess. Yeah, your relationship's destroyed. Yeah, the financial things. Why don't you just let me see what I can do with broken pieces? A broken and a contrite spirit, he will not despise. The goal isn't to see how many stripes we can get. But when we don't recognize what he's doing, we don't listen to the reproof, he loves you too much not to send a hard thing. He loves you too much not to chase it, to scourge. Instead of being upset at the scourging, why not consider him who endured such contradiction of sinners against himself, lest ye be weary and faint in your minds. You think you've had it tough? Look what he went through. And you justly, he for us. Let's stand to our feet tonight.